day to day, I suppose, like everybody working from home. So no longer commuting into the office, um, and just being at home and doing work. Um, I suppose the caveat to that as well is that like, I'm like an hour or plus away from work. So because of that, even when restrictions were changing and there was the certain distances and stuff, I was always just too far. And it hasn't affected my work or anything. So my work pre-COVID meant that I could work from home at some points. Um, so I suppose in that regard, it's okay. And oddly enough, I actually find that I really enjoy working from home. Um, so I don't find it to be too much of an inconvenience or anything. In fact, I'm probably one of very few that would say this, but I think it's helped with like a more healthy lifestyle. Being able to take regular breaks, go for a bit of fresh air, walks, good lunches, that kind of thing. So I suppose from that regard, it's been positive. Um, Day to day, then I suppose the other thing is like, which was just very odd timing. I was pregnant pre-COVID, and then I had my child during like the first week of the first lockdown. So my life transitioned to a new kind of day to day, while also going into a COVID era, which was a bit strange as well. And for the most part, it just meant not being able to socialize my child as much as I would have liked. Now she still goes to creche and that kind of thing, but there's things that would have been normal that we couldn't do. So, like, for instance, going into creche and being able to see the room and meet the staff before handing over your newborn child. So, but we weren't able to do that. So we just had to meet a very lovely woman in a car park wearing a mask and kind of hand our child over. So that was a bit jarring, but she's doing great. She's thriving there. So it's okay, I suppose. But there's little things there, comforts, I suppose, that would have made other transitions easier that just have been completely removed. Um, yeah, so I'm finding it a bit difficult, I suppose, to answer the question because my day to day changed while COVID rocked up. And I mean that in the sense of lockdown here in Ireland and not just COVID and how it affects the rest of the world. Sure, yeah. Okay, so where we are right now is one of the gardens at my house. So this is what's affectionately called a fairy garden. I couldn't really get the detail of it because it's quite I suppose sheltered. So what it is we have these nice gargoyles on the wall, and there's this little fence, and actually coming out from the two gargoyles, there's a stone wall that goes around. So this is one like little small circular garden, and then we have a great big cherry blossom tree behind us, quite an old one, and it's canopied the whole garden, so it's like a complete little roof on it, so it's completely sheltered. And at the very back, then there's two little apple trees. It's not a huge garden, but it's a very pretty garden. There's something quite magical about it. Um, and also, I live quite remotely, so you can hear from the audio. There's lots of birds, quite a bit actually. There's like a cuckoo, and that you can hear on the audio. So a cuckoo and a pheasant, a pigeon, um, obviously the little bird singing away. So there's a lot of nature around us, and actually, I think there's a branch snap at one point as well, which is probably deer. Um, so this place is just, or the virtual space that I have here is like a little barrier that moves into a very kind of nature area, which is quite nice. When I moved into the house I'm living in, my family moved country at the same time, and when they'd come over and visit, this was kind of like the favorite garden to hang out. My family members moved to bigger cities around Europe, so because of that, they'd be quite urban. So they just liked coming and panning out under this tree. And actually, just before lockdown kind of really set in, so like I suppose right lockdown happened in March. So like in the few months beforehand, my family were over here visiting, And actually, one of the things we did in this garden was actually put these gargoyles up. So they used to be just like a little stone ball, and we kind of made it. And when I say my family, this was like my parents, my siblings. We took the stone balls off and we put these gargoyles up, which is really nice. And again, it was just kind of give a bit more sense of magic to the garden. Um, but yeah, it's particularly with my mum. This is a very special place to her. She thinks it's quite magical as well. Um, the thing about the garden as well and sharing this space is because it's a cherry blossom. Funny enough, like it, the way it blooms, and that's why I tried to get a cherry blossom tree because it's so important. Is actually around the sharing. So like when we moved into this house or when we came to the viewings, the tree wasn't in bloom. And probably a good thing we didn't know it was in bloom either, because we probably would put more bids in. But anyway, so we didn't know it was actually cherry blossom. And then our first year in the house, it was a very beautiful thing to find. And actually, my relatives were over visiting me the first time it bloomed. So we thought it was amazing. We've never seen so many pretty blossoms because, like I said, it canopies the whole garden. So you can lie down in it and look up. And then the following year, is actually when my daughter was born. So my daughter was sick and she didn't get to come home. And that year, the cherry blossom didn't bloom for a while. It was actually a late bloom that year, which was quite coincidental. And it was actually like the day, if maybe 2 days at a push, the day before she came home. So she had like a 2 week stay in the neonatal. So the day she came home, the tree was in full blossom. So that became quite sentimental to us. So when she was home, we did our best to just kind of relax in the shade here because you can be outside but protected from the sun, which was quite nice. So us as a family, so me, my husband, and my child would come out here. And then the following year, because we were still in lockdown during her first birthday, the tree was in bloom again for her birthday. So we made a point to come out and spend some time underneath here. She likes playing in the grass. There's loads of little twigs and leaves. And also I use this tree for some like fun craft projects. So like you can press the flowers and you can send them in cards. So I've been actually pressing flowers and putting them on cards for my relatives because they didn't want to see them this year. So I posted it to them across Europe. You can do other things with it. So this space is always shared quite a bit with family, I suppose. And it's something we do unintentionally, but quite regularly when it blooms. I suppose the difference would be was pre-lockdown, it would be my extended family. So like siblings and parents. And then during lockdown, I should say, they can't because they can't visit because they're overseas. So it was just my immediate family now, I suppose, my daughter and my husband. It would 100% be the day she came home. So a little bit of context there. I think it was the second last week, 24th of March-ish, we went into lockdown. So I was here. My mum was here for a little while. The plan was that she would be here for maternity leave, help me out for the first while, but she couldn't. So she actually leave quite early. And she didn't get to meet my daughter. And for this whole time, the tree wasn't in bloom, and my child was born in April, and usually cherry blossoms bloom kind of like early April, like maybe late March to early April. The cherry blossom still didn't bloom, and lots happened with the hospital and how sick she was, and it was quite serious. And for a while, she almost didn't make it. And then things turned around, thank God. And when she did come home, the tree was in full blossom and it was a sunny day and it was lovely. And I have photos of it. And I think that's the most defining moment because this space was like almost a celebration of her coming home. A few things, I suppose. I suppose this lockdown, first of all, just to clarify, I was very blessed. A lot of people I appreciate were, when they were locked down in cities, and I think they felt quite, claustrophobic. I can't speak for them, but this is something you hear quite a bit. Whereas I was very lucky to have the opposite. So I was out in very rural countryside. Now that doesn't suit everybody, but one of the things I learned from this space is that it does suit me. So during the days where it's a bit too much and you you're listening to all the news on the radio and the next round of lockdown and the different levels coming in and not being able to travel across counties and so on. Um, what I learned about myself coming to this space is that I can find a sense of calm, I suppose. In one sense, that's one thing. So like coming out and just listening to the bird song for a while and seeing the different lights come through the tree, even on a dull overcast day or at night, like when the moon is out and you see the stars, it's all quite beautiful. But you just have a moment where you can kind of almost escape the craziness of the world, be it COVID or post COVID, and you can have a sense of calm. So one thing I learned about myself then I suppose is that I find nature to be quite calming and quite good in terms of mental health. Um, and now, obviously, because of my whole experience with the tree blooming when my daughter came home, I find that I'm very when the tree does bloom, I'm very appreciative because, and I'm going to butcher this, but I believe in a lot of well, particularly in Japan, you know, when cherry blossoms bloom, there's the sakura season, and there's lots of things about this. But I think it's also taking time to acknowledge that things can be short, they can be long in terms of time, and to just really embrace it and celebrate the beauty of a cherry blossom tree, even though it's quite short. So I find now that when the tree does blossom, I do like to take that time, take a moment to reflect. So I suppose the other thing that I learned about myself and this tree in the garden is that it's made me quite reflective, I suppose, and appreciate things. So I suppose they'd be the big things. The nature calms me, particularly this space, and it makes me a bit more reflective and take a pause, I suppose, is the other one. I suppose if we think about pre-COVID world, I wouldn't have got to spend as much time here as I would have liked. So going in, working in town, so there'd be the hour commute, and then obviously when you come out and you miss, I was always trying to avoid rush hour, but you know you hit it from time to time, so there'd be an extra, 2-3 hours of just commuting on top of your work day. And then when I come home, I have a lot of pets. So it would be looking after everyone, making sure the zoo is fed and stuff. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to come here pre COVID. So oddly enough, COVID has actually given me the opportunity to kind of come here a bit more because there has been times when in work I could get a very, I could have a bad meeting, bad email, all sorts of, everyone has it, but all sorts of dramas pop up in the day and stressors and that kind of thing. And like what you'd do in the office where you'd go and you'd make a cup of tea and you'd sit down and you'd take your minute and you'd respond, I'm able to make that cup of tea and have a minute sitting in the garden. Or even just how my house is laid out is there's like a front door that's quite close to this garden, and then my office is like a little bit away, but it's got another door into it. So if I wanted to, I could just walk out the front door, stand here by the gates for a while, take a minute. The branches of the cherry blossom actually poke over this, so you have like almost like a little awning over the wall. So you can just have a moment there, and then you can walk into the office. So you can take your minute of thought. So I say I come here several times in the day, and also because it's quite close to the front door and I'm doing the crash run for my daughter in the morning, we walk past it, we have a look at the gargoyles, we talk to them, all that fun stuff. And then when we come home, if she's awake, we might go in for a minute, and then on the weekends we go in and we play and that kind of thing. So I would say because of COVID, I'm here a lot more, and it's been a positive thing for me. So the work from home and being able to have these moments in nature have been quite positive for me, and I'm lucky to say that. I found making this to be quite an emotional journey. The first one was finding a space, and obviously during lockdown as well. At the time and having the restrictions, there wasn't too many places I could go, and this one was an obvious choice anyway. Um, So one of the things I felt quite a bit was very frustrated because I kept taking the photos, and because the place is so heavily densed and canopied by the tree, it's very difficult for the software to pick up. And that's not the software's fault. It's the over detailed area. And it was just difficult. I had like maybe 3 or 4 goes, and it did make me frustrated. And it's not because the technology was the problem. It's because I'm so aware of what this place looks like in reality, and this obviously this emotional attachment I have to it. I really wanted it to look and feel the way it does in the real life, to try get that across. And then when I was putting it together and I had the pieces, you start to learn that really it's not actually the physical appearance. It's maybe, like it doesn't need to be the most detailed model to really get across that space. Like there's still a tree, there's still the walls. The tree is my signifier of the seasons and the different meanings. And the wall with the gargoyles are like my family involvement. So it didn't need to be that. So that was interesting. But also, I suppose taking pictures of quite of a place that you have an emotional attachment to was, I thought, was very interesting. And in honesty, I didn't think it would be quite the emotional journey I was going to have. I didn't expect it, and it was interesting. It was interesting to have it. And I really like this idea of social VR and being able to show people. And in honesty, if my family were a bit more technically inclined, it would have been very nice to go, "Hey, you missed the cherry blossoms this year, but look, come online and we can look at it." Now, my siblings probably could, no bother, but my parents wouldn't be able to. But it's a very nice idea to be able to put a space together that's quite meaningful and still share it, even though we're across seas and we can't see each other right now. So that's really lovely. And outside of that, it's like I can share it with friends around Ireland who are all in lockdown. So um, I suppose my final thought on it would be I did not expect it to be quite the emotional journey it would be. And I was very interested and I enjoyed it. But I'm also hugely interested in this social VR side of things and out space and sharing spaces. I think that's the most interesting, is sharing a space. It's not about sharing a model, but an actual space. And the audio, I think, really helps illustrate that space a bit better. So yeah, I think that would be it. Just really enjoyed it.